Welcome to Study with the Best, the magazine show that's all about CUNY. I'm Tina Beth Pena. On today's episode, we'll explore criminology as filtered through the CUNY lens. We'll meet a murder historian, talk to a man who's making a real difference in crime-ridden communities, learn about programs that offer a lifeline to people leaving prison, and so much more. But first, John Jay College President Jeremy Travis once asked, if 700,000 people are leaving our prisons, how should the nation's educational institutions be organized to help them make a successful transition to free society? The answer? A new program called Prison to College Pipeline.
I have been enrolled in John Jay for the last 3.5 years. I was locked up for 10 years. When you're first incarcerated, you still have that wild side. You still have the reason why you were there. You still have that inside you. But it takes a toll, your body, your mind, your soul. It takes a toll. Like every day, there's something stripped away from you. And you want that back. And you're supposed to be rehabilitating yourself. If the incarceration doesn't do it for you, if the jail doesn't do it for you, you have to do it for yourself.
We designed the program so that it would begin in prison, but it would ultimately end on a CUNY campus where so much opportunity is available to our students beyond what we would be able to literally transport to the facility. We have faculty from John Jay College and our partner institution, Hostos Community College, that travel up to the facility, give the classes, and the students earn credits that they're able to use towards their degree when they come home.
In the beginning of the play, the first thing you say is, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." Right away, we have ambiguity between good and evil, between dark and light. Feel free to say anything you want in here. This is not about me. I couldn't understand Macbeth either.
A huge feature of the Prison to College Pipeline is called our Learning Exchange. And what we do is once a month, we bring a cohort of students from John Jay College who take classes here on campus and from Hostos Community College up to Otisville Correctional Facility to take a blended class with the incarcerated students. And really, it's such a amazing feature of the program because it serves multiple purposes. The students who are coming from John Jay and Hostos are studying criminal justice, and we think that it's a critical part of that criminal justice education to be able to engage with the people who are involved in that system and be able to have a cross-pollination and learning with each other. For our incarcerated students, they're able to see that their counterparts, that they're classmates, and that the program really is a robust experience, just like the college experience here on campus.
Take the most powerful pieces of it.
All right.
I think it's a little long and it gets repetitive. So I want you to find, like, again, go with your strength, which is the imagery pieces.
Right. My first class was English 101. We knew that we were in college because she was no holds bar. She gave it to you how I would get it in a John Jay classroom on campus. We didn't want to fail, not just for us, but we didn't want to fail for the future classes. We wanted to be that foundation. So when people said, you know, he was incarcerated for such and such years, but he has a bachelor's in this. He went on to get a master's in this. He went on to get a doctor in this. There's many individuals that I've met throughout the years that have doctorates that's been incarcerated. And that blows my mind.
The United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated people are right here in the United States. It's a huge thing to consider when we have gotten into this exercise of responding to social problems through incarceration. Our aim in the Prison to College Pipeline is to obviously bring higher education to folks who would not have the opportunity otherwise, but also to impact what we do in our prisons and our jails. And the best way to make kind of change in life and to have transformative change occur is through education. And there really isn't a better way to do that.
While you're incarcerated, any document that you put on or you sign, you have to put your name, you put your DIN number. And I would say after about maybe a month and a half, it was just the name. And that's when we knew we weren't incarcerated when we were in that class for 3 hours. We were students. We were CUNY students. We were John Jay students. And that was probably the most important part of our renaissance or our new life.
People, when they leave prison, face a number of challenges and roadblocks and barriers. Some of them are set up by our legal system, right? And some of them are a function of how long a person has been away, what kind of challenges they faced before they left. To rattle off a few, reuniting with family, right? And having to renegotiate relationships that have been severed by that individual's incarceration. We hear students who come home and say, wow, everything's moving so fast. And having to move from an environment where things didn't move so quickly. And very unfortunately, our students are having to navigate all of that with this huge stigma and cloak of being someone who was formerly incarcerated.
I want to give a round of applause to cohort number 4, my students who got their grades yesterday, who are officially completing their first semester in college. So I am proud.
It's intentional that we send people away and isolate them from their communities. And what we're really achieving as a part of this project is bringing people back in touch with their communities and building new communities.
I want to go on to journalism, sports journalism. And I'm a big sports fan. I watch all major sports. And I want to get into that field because it's something that I know very well. And I know that it's something that I can aspire to, and my incarceration wouldn't stop me from moving ahead in that field. This program opens the door for you, helps you open the door, and walks you through the path that you want on to a better person. It makes you a better person. It makes you want to be a better person.
Communities torn apart by crimes and drugs exist all across our nation. Ari Goldberg meets a man making a difference.
Violent crime has been a problem in urban areas for decades, but one man and the organization supporting him has helped make dramatic reductions in the scale of inner-city violence.
We work on the most severe crime and public safety issues that affect the most vulnerable communities. We develop and help cities actually implement pragmatic operational work that makes a real difference on the ground.
Out of John Jay College, David Kennedy runs the National Network for Safe Communities, an award-winning group making real changes in vulnerable communities.
The most fundamental driver of serious crime, as well as the conditions that we're all seeing now that can lead to riots in a heartbeat, is the historic and present deeply broken relationship between especially black neighborhoods and the police.
20 years ago, one such broken relationship was revealed in Boston during the crack epidemic. But Kennedy and his colleagues in Operation Ceasefire broke apart the stranglehold of violence that was consuming communities.
A team of us went out into the field and we set up with some very, very, very sharp practitioners, including the gang unit in the Boston Police Department. We sat them down and we put them around a map of Boston and gave one of them a black magic marker and said, start somewhere and tell us where these gangs are. Each of these circles is a drug crew. It's usually under 0.5% of the entire city. That is something we can work with.
Known as the Boston Miracle, the work of Kennedy and his colleagues reduced youth homicide rates by a remarkable 63%. And how they achieved this miracle was deceptively simple. They talk to people.
So you say to the police, they think you're a race predator. We both know that's wrong. And then you say to the community, they think you're all living off drug money. And we know you're not. We know that there's 16 identified young men in the neighborhood who are actually selling drugs. It turns out that you can translate these narratives across that divide in ways that very quickly both sides can understand. Why don't we sit those 16 guys down and tell them to stop? And they may not listen to the chief of police, but they will listen to their grandmothers.
And this hands-on approach of fostering cooperation between communities and law enforcement has been effective in neighborhoods across the country. Stockton's homicide rate dropped 42%, Chicago 27%, Indianapolis 34%, Cincinnati 41%. It's been so successful, in fact, that the Department of Justice has come on board.
The drug market intervention started out 10 years ago in a town called High Point, North Carolina. They had 5 of these intergenerational open store drug markets. A few years later, they didn't have any. And the Justice Department then picked it up. It's been done all over the country.
Kennedy's approach has won over the opposition, but it's taken time.
It's a long, slow slog to get people to think about things in a different way. But actually, in policing and in a lot of other circles, people really do get this now. This really flies in the face of the way almost everybody thinks about crime. It's now worked out for homicide, for individual violent offenders, for gangs, for drug markets, for domestic violence.
Whenever there's violence going on in cities, it sounds like every cable news show talks about we need to have a national dialogue about these issues. But sort of it doesn't seem to go anywhere.
If you say to both sides, all of us want the killing to stop. And one of the things that's standing in the way of that is our anger at each other. A lot of the reasons we're angry are because we misunderstand each other. So let's actually deal with those understandings and misunderstandings. That turns out to be, a lot of the time, remarkably easy.
Kennedy and his colleagues are now aiming larger, taking a more formal approach to community healing that's worked in places like South Africa, Latin America, and the Balkans.
I, in my office at John Jay, are managing a very, very big Justice Department initiative. One of its main elements is that in 6 cities across the country, we are going to be figuring out how to do on something like a citywide scale formal reconciliation between the police and angry neighborhoods. This isn't about one instance, it's not about one person, it's not about one issue. Everybody's done wrong. Everybody has also done a whole lot that is really powerful and correct. And this is nobody's fault. We've done this together, and we need to get out of it together.
In New York State, 1 in 3 people arrested are never convicted of any offense, but suffer drastic legal consequences due to their arrest alone. The Bronx Defenders seeks to change that by offering a new holistic approach to legal representation.
When we think of the criminal justice system, we tend to think of, the show Law and Order, or we tend to think of a system where people are accused of crimes and they're given their fair day in court, or they're given an opportunity to defend themselves. The reality of the system is that while our court system is one of the best in the world, we have a great need for individualized attention, for treating each person that comes through the criminal justice system with respect. There are so many collateral consequences of arrest and conviction that a lot of people don't even know about. They don't know that a person can lose their eligibility for public housing if they're arrested or convicted of particular crimes. So while the courts don't need to look at the enmeshed penalties of criminal convictions or criminal arrests, they can, only if we advocate for them. If a person is arrested in the county of the Bronx, they are brought through the booking process and the arraignment process, and at that time, if they can't afford an attorney, there will be a public defender that's assigned to that person. And the Bronx Defenders has a contract with the City of New York in the state of New York to provide services to those that can't afford an attorney. We don't believe that the inability to afford an attorney should deny any rights to an individual in the criminal justice system. And in fact, we go above and beyond to make sure that everybody has the most zealous representation.
After meeting the Bronx Defenders and coming here and everything, I feel like a large weight is off my shoulders and I can finally breathe a little.
I think it's really, really hard to imagine what it would be like to have child welfare authorities knock on your door and ask to see your children and threaten to take your children and have no one to call. And with the Bronx Defenders in the Bronx community now, there is someone to call.
They helped me within that first week get unsupervised visits, and by the second month of everything going on, my kids was returned back home.
I'm extremely proud to be a CUNY Law alum. It's one of the only law schools, if not the only one, that is devoted solely to public interest in providing an excellent legal education. And its motto is law in the service of public need, which is so extremely powerful to even say those words, to say that law should be in the service of public need. It's not an option. At CUNY, it's something that we take very seriously and we see as a vocation. And that's why those that go there and those that are alumni and part of the CUNY family believe very strongly in lawyering for public good.
Sometimes a single discovery changes our lives forever. Thomas Edison and the light bulb, Henry Ford and his Model T. And 30 years ago, a seismic shift occurred in the world of criminology. Barry Mitchell has just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts.
We're at the office of New York City's chief medical examiner. We've all seen those police procedural shows on TV. CSI, NCIS, Blue Bloods, Law and Order, Bones. But how realistic are they?
Basically what they're doing on those shows is combining the roles of several people into one to make it more interesting. So they're taking the things that a district attorney might do, they're taking some things that a medical examiner does, they're taking some things that a police officer does, and they're taking things that a forensic scientist does, and they're giving all those responsibilities to the forensic scientist.
Meet Andrew Schweighardt from Northport, Long Island, Ph.D. from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and currently a criminalist for the City of New York.
Criminalist is someone at our agency who examines articles of evidence from a crime for body fluids like blood, semen, and saliva, and tests those fluids to determine if they're of human origin, to determine if they are indeed the fluids that we think they might be, and then to determine if we can get a DNA profile from those fluids. Besides our homicide and sex crimes and property crimes units, we also have a team of scientists dedicated to solving missing persons cases, and also we still have a team of scientists working on World Trade Center identifications.
Quick, what does DNA stand for?
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
He's good.
DNA is a molecule found in the nucleus of every cell in our body, except red blood cells. DNA is our genetic blueprint. It's a pretty safe bet that no two people on Earth have the same DNA.
With certain exceptions like identical twins would have.
But as human beings, everyone's DNA has some things in common.
About 99% of human DNA is identical across all humans. That's what gives us all 2 ears and 2 eyes and arms and legs, but we're looking at that very small fraction of DNA that is unique to each person.
The first time DNA evidence was successfully used to prosecute a case was in 1986. Shortly after, Maury Povich announced for the first time, "You are not the father." Before the introduction of DNA typing, law enforcement had to rely on other kinds of physical evidence.
All identification is by eye, for no machine has yet been devised to classify fingerprints, every one of which is different.
DNA is superior to other methods of identification because it gives us very powerful statistics. When we determine a match in our laboratory, typically the match statistics are somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in several trillion. The samples that we work with can be very tiny, and we can still get useful data from it. So in this tube is a very small volume of liquid, 2 microliters. We can work with stains that originate from amount of liquid this small and still successfully get DNA profiles.
Sometimes DNA evidence is not visible to the naked eye. So Dr. Schweighardt showed me a special room that requires protective glasses.
I don't see any stains. I don't see anything. It's a hat. It's a cap.
This is an ultraviolet light source, or an alternate light source, that we use to examine evidence for stains that we couldn't see with our own eyes.
And now, look at all this. Sweat.
That's right. We wouldn't be getting the DNA from the sweat itself. Basically, if I was to make a cutting of this, we'd be getting the DNA from skin cells that were rubbed off with the sweat.
Sometimes DNA is degraded or contaminated before it gets to the lab. Or maybe there's no viable tissue or body fluids from which to extract a sample. Dr. Schweighardt specializes in working with another kind of DNA found in bones and hair.
I work in a team called the mitochondrial DNA unit, and there we work with a type of DNA called mitochondrial DNA. It's less susceptible to degradation. I've always been interested in science and law enforcement. I also didn't see myself as a police officer walking a beat and carrying a firearm and having to chase people and make arrests. And forensic science just seemed like a natural compromise. John Jay was everything to my career. I was in contact with some of the most talented people in my field. I was working in state-of-the-art facilities and learning there. So CUNY opened so many doors to me, and without it, I don't think I'd be working at the medical examiner's office. That just gave me such a great foundation to build off of. What I like about my job is that we're always helping people, and what I especially like about it is that we're not necessarily playing for one side or the other. We like to think of ourselves as advocates for the truth. If you look in our lobby, we have a big sign that says "Science Serving Justice." It's not science serving the police, it's not science serving the prosecutor. We're just totally neutral, looking for the right answer, the truth.
Barry Mitchell, Study with the Best.
What is it about real-life murder that so engages us? True crime author Harold Schechter breaks down the historical roots of the genre and why we keep coming back for more.
I mean, I think I begin my true crime anthology, with this famous quote from Plato: "The virtuous man dreams what the wicked man really does." The engagement with true crime stories allows us vicariously to release some of these impulses in a safe, socially approved way. True crime is a very, very, very old literary genre. Initially you had things like Puritan execution sermons that describe in detail, the crimes for which these criminals are being hanged for, and offering the reader, in addition to the moral edification, all the grisly details of the crime. That then evolves into the kind of pulp true detective magazine that filled the newsstands back in the 1930s. I mean, there were dozens and dozens of them. In terms of modern true crime, the benchmark work was Capote's In Cold Blood. I think it is kind of a golden age of true crime narrative in various media, but what's really changed is that the cultural status of true crime, which has become much less disreputable than it was in the past, now it's really become far more mainstream.
Not tell the whole truth. Nobody tells the whole truth.
My own interest in this really started with my fascination with monsters. Why is it that human beings, and going back to our childhoods, need stories about monsters? Every now and then a criminal will come along who seems like the real-life flesh and blood incarnation of some mythic folk monster. In the case of Ed Gein, it happened to be true. There really was this ogre, living off the beaten path in this creepy little house. Same thing with Albert Fish. Albert Fish seemed to me to be like a real-life flesh and blood incarnation of the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood. When the Son of Sam was at large in New York City back in the 70s, it reduces the entire adult population of the city into a state of fearful, understruck childhood. It's like, this, again, monster from your childhood has come to life in the actual world. That is the dilemma if you're writing true crime. You're torn between, presenting things in a strictly, absolutely factual manner. But then there are also the demands of storytelling. I try to stick very, very, very rigorously to documented facts. In a book like The Mad Sculptor, there's literally nothing in that book that is not based on some kind of documentary evidence. So if there's dialogue, I've taken it from newspaper articles or psychiatric reports. Well, The Mad Sculptor was the tabloid nickname given to Robert Irwin, who was a talented young sculptor, also quite mad, who committed this very, very, very sensational triple murder in New York City in the Upper East Side neighborhood of Beekman Place on Easter Sunday, 1937. You know, he was the subject of the largest manhunt at that time that had ever been conducted, when his identity was discovered, and he hopped on a bus and made his way to Chicago, and he knew the jig was up. You know, he contacted this newspaper and said he would turn himself over to them and provide them with an exclusive confession. He knew he was going to be photographed endlessly, and he wanted to cut a nice figure, so he demanded that they provide him with a nice white linen suit. This is a box handmade by Robert Irwin, the Mad Sculptor, depicting one of his victims, the beautiful artist model Ronnie Gedeon, who posed for him naked on several occasions. When I write my books, I often like to have some totemic object that I keep near me, just to give me a sense of living connection to the crime that I'm writing about. I'm interested, among other things, in why certain crimes enter into the cultural mythology. You know, why Lizzie Borden, for example, and not, you know, there are other axe murderers contemporaneous with her. You know, why Leopold and Loeb? You know, Leopold and Loeb kidnapped and murdered, you know, one young pre-adolescent boy. It has to do with story. It has to do with the characters. It has less to do with the, you know, heinousness of the crime, although that can be an aspect of it. You know, because certain crimes have a kind of, well, they have a symbolic value to the society. You know, they often will crystallize kinds of anxieties that are very, very dominant in the culture at that moment. True crime writing acknowledges the disturbing persistence of the most frightening and destructive capacities of the species. Sometimes that acknowledgement results in art of a high order. Sometimes merely a news reporting we find impossible to ignore. We attend to what it tells us as we would to an account of a natural disaster or a freakish anomaly, except that the disaster, the anomaly, is all too human.
That's our show for today. For more information on what you just saw, log on to our website at CUNY.TV or check out our Study with the Best Facebook page. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.